Unit 7, Content Objective 7.2. Explain how the structure of cities around the world vary. Your I can statements for this content objective are as follows. 1. Compare and contrast urban models in North America and Europe. 2. Explain the main differences to the following North American urban models. Those North American urban models are A. Concentric zone model, B. Sector model, and C. Multi-nuclei model. 3. Compare and contrast how the U.S. urban models compare to other world regional urban areas. How are cities outside the North America different? Well, American cities are less dominated, or outside of America, they're less dominated by business activities. Hence, American cities are often centered around business service activity. Hence, when we looked at services in the previous slide, we know the clustering of services are going to create a larger city that have more specialized services, and thus when the services become more specialized and you advance in consumer services, you're going to need to grow large skyscrapers. Outside of the U.S., there are prominent buildings that have cultural significance. Those can be churches or they can be government buildings. And oftentimes near those government or churches, they offer more space for congregations. Congregational areas are such as parks or squares. Originally, they predate the car, so they have very narrow streets. And thus, when you have churches and government and you have less economic services, you're going to have less skyscrapers. And if you have less skyscrapers, you're going to have more residential populations. And when we look at the distribution of residential populations in less developed regions, and even regions of Europe that predate the car, the development of cities predate the car, you're going to have the wealthy residents in the central city. Organic city streets. So we can see that organic city streets don't follow a pattern in terms of overall distribution of infrastructure. And we see a planned city, where a planned city is going to follow a grid system that is implemented by city planners. And we can see that grid system by the streets and how they're labeled through alphabetic means, and then also they're more linear in terms of moving east, west, south, and intersecting. Urban models. The first urban model is the concentric zone model by Burgess. Burgess came up with a model after looking at Chicago, because Chicago is a very flat and open land. Actually, all three models were modeled after Chicago, and the first being Burgess. Burgess said that cities grow in concentric rings. As a city grows, it grows outward symmetrically in rings, as you can see to the right. And the core center will be where services are. Services that are concentrated in the middle will form the CBD, which is known as the Central Business District. Then we're in early services, keep in mind those were secondary services, because remember, Industrial Revolution creates urbanization. Most factories will be in the center of the city, so there will be a zone of transition. Those will be the workers at those factories. And then as factories develop and more services, consumer services are bought, then it creates social stratification, different social classes. And the wealthier, or the social class that it might have a higher ranking job in that factory, will then move out to the working class. And the people that now have in that hierarchical structure within an organization, they're the ones that oversee all, or supervisors, or people that have higher ranking positions now moved outward to more land, larger plots of land where you see better residents. And then the very wealthy will move out to the commuter zone, because they'll be the ones that are able to afford a car in the 1920s, which is a very small percentage of the population. And they would be the ones that, again, would have a larger plot of land, a single family home. They would have a very large yard. When we look at the concentric zone model, we can see how These plots of lands and building size varies. We see the skyscrapers in the center. Or when you go to the zone of transition, they're going to be multi-unit complexes that are closer together. And then outside of that, they'll be a little bit more spread out, but they'll be single-track homes, one-level single-track homes. And then when you move further out to the zone of better residence, look at the size of land. That now you have private land. And then when you go further out, now you have private land in larger houses in the commuter zone. All right, the second model was created by Hoyt in 1939, and he said that as a city develops, you have concentric zone rings, but you also have sectors. Those sectors.
Rubich, I'm getting echoing. This is weird. It's like being at the football stadium. Just wanted to let you all know we had a brief moment where the water was turned off, but it is turned back on at this time, so we're going to be just fine. Have a great day.
All right, Hoyt's sector models. Again, he advanced the concentric zones and included sectors. These sectors were because of advancement in transportation. Those sectors, as you can see right here, you see the transportation to industry, which would be 2. And anytime you have industry at a large interstate or sector, you're going to have low-class residents because it's going to be less desirable neighborhoods. Right next to the CBD and next to that major interstate, or major roadway. And then you'll have the middle class that's going to be found outside, and then you'll have the wealthy that has a sector that spikes into a city. The multinuclei model is created by Harris and Ullman, and this was in 1945. They said that cities have a more complex structure. There are multiple nodes of importance. Those multiple nodes can be airports, parks, universities, multinational headquarters. They can be manufacturing centers. They said that people tend to grow in concentric rings around those nodes. And we look at the multinuclei model here, and we see the complexity. It has 9 different zones, so we can see that industry is still prevalent in the CBD, but we also have the advancement of other nodes, such as heavy manufacturing. And we can also see where an airport might be. We can also see where industrial suburbs sprout out. And again, those would be major nodes that attract a population, and they grow. They can grow organically. Oftentimes they'll grow in concentric rings. All right, European cities. Upper class are found near the city center. Quality of life diminishes as you get to the CBD. Skyscrapers are in the suburbs. That's where the poor reside. And then neighborhood clustering is very common because of extensive use of space in those CBDs. Here's a look at France, and we can see France follows what would be a sector model. We can see the concentric rings, but we also see the sector that moves westward from Paris. All right. Other foreign cities, such as LDCs, they're oftentimes they have a colonial influence on the design of their cities. And some LDCs have demolished the colonial influence, and they've followed more standardized plans, such as Latin America. There's always a central plaza, Zolocala, or a cathedral, the importance of Roman Catholicism. Or they'll follow a grid system of streets and markets and squares, which is often found in modern cities that have world dominance in the global landscape. Destination for millions of migrants move to these cities. So you always have squatter settlements that are in the outlying fringe areas. And then you have the forbidden city of Beijing. And then the urban sprawl of Mexico City. And there's some favelas, which are the squatter settlements found in Rio de Janeiro. And the favelas, they are found in low-lying areas where the wealthy is found in high cliffs.